Greetings, everyone. It's Miss Brown again, and I'm back with our final day and our final lesson. It's been a pleasure working with you guys this week. We're on day 5 of identifying figurative language in text, as well as identifying cause and effect and how it affects the plot of a story. So without further ado, let's get started with the presentation. Okay, so our final lesson is what have we learned? Again, we will identify and analyze figurative language in short examples of text. We will then also identify cause and effect relationships in a story and connect them back to the plot. For today's lesson, you need a notebook and a pencil. Now, quick recap, these are our notes. You should have figurative language vocabulary cards that you completed this week. However, if for some reason you don't have those, these are the figurative language notes that you'll need. In addition to those notes, we have the plot notes. So we know that plot is a series of events that make up a story, and then we have the elements of plot here as well as a plot chart. So those are just references that you may need to refer back to when you're doing your independent practice today. Okay, for our guided practice, you are going to read each of the sentences attached to the link. So that's the practice link. I'll click on it in a moment. Then you'll use your figurative language cards to identify the type of figurative language that's being used in each sentence. So here's the link. So what I'll do is read the sentences to you, and then you guys can answer the questions in your notebook. So for each of the following phrases, we're going to identify which technique is being used. The 5 that we're looking at are simile, metaphor, personification, idiom, and hyperbole. And then on the second line, we'll write. So this is it. That test was a piece of cake. That is an example of an idiom, and it means that the test was very easy. So it wasn't literally a piece of cake, it just was a very easy test. So I'll read the questions, and then you need to write the example of which type of figurative language is being used and what it means. Number 1, the spicy salsa set my mouth on fire. What type of figurative language is it, and what does it mean? Number 2, the fog blanketed the lake in the early morning. Number 3, the clouds were like pillows floating in the sky. Number 4, many students say that the school is a factory that works them too hard. Number 5, he was told, break a leg before going on stage. Number 6, the sun slept behind a cloud. Number 7, Carly was sweating bullets waiting to see her grade on the test. Number 8, by volunteering to run the prom committee, you probably bit off more than you can chew. I'll read that again. By volunteering to run the prom committee, you probably bit off more than you can chew. And number 9, it was as hot as the desert in school today. Last one. The car is a dinosaur, so we may have to buy a new one soon. The car is a dinosaur, so we may have to buy a new one soon. Again, you're writing the example of what type of figurative language is being used, and then you're going to write what it means. So if I were you, I would pause the video here. I would answer the questions, and then after about 5 minutes, I would resume the video, and we'll go over the answer key together. Okay, so now it's time to review the answers. Number 1, the spicy salsa set my mouth on fire. That is an example of a hyperbole, and we're basically saying that the salsa was very hot. Number 2, the fog blanketed the lake in the early morning. That is an example of personification, and it means that the fog covered the lake area. Number 3, the clouds were like pillows floating in the sky. That is an example of a simile, and it's comparing the clouds to floating pillows. Number 4, many students say that the school is a factory that works them too hard. That is a metaphor, and it compares the school to a factory, and it does not use like or as you can tell. Number 5, he was told to break a leg before going on stage. That is an example of an idiom, and it means good luck. Number 6, the sun slept behind a cloud. That is an example of personification, and that means that the sun was well hidden behind the cloud. Number 7, Carly was sweating bullets waiting to see her grade on the test. This is a hyperbole, and it means that she was very nervous as she awaited her grade. Number 8, by volunteering to run the prom committee, you probably bit off more than you can chew. That is an idiom, and it means that you've taken on more tasks than you can handle. Number 9, it was as hot as the desert in school today. That is an example of a simile, and it means that the school was very hot. School building, that is. And number 10, the car is a dinosaur, so we may have to buy a new one soon. That is an example of a hyperbole, and it means that the car is very old or antiquated, which is another word for old. Okay, now we're on to our independent practice. You're going to click on the reading selection. This is the short story 11. It's by Sandra Cicernos. So you're going to read the actual short story first. So I won't take the time to read this one to you because it's a bit longer than some of the activities that I've given you. So at this point, after I explain the instructions, you can pause the video. So you need to click on the link and read the short story, and then click on the second link to access your questions. These are the questions related to the short story. So the first one addresses the plot of the story. You basically have to write the elements of plot in the correct sections on this sheet or on your notebooks. You'll use this as a reference, and then you'll write that in your notebooks. If you want, you can just draw a plot chart. That's why I put this example here so that you guys can do that in your notebooks if that's easier than just writing everything out like I've done down here. For the rest of the questions, you're going to answer them accordingly. Some of them are multiple choice, and they address figurative language. Others are short answer responses. So you will write the responses to these questions in your notebooks as well. There are a total of 9 questions. So I would pause the video here if I were you. And then when you're done, I would press resume, and you should be on the next slide where you have your answers. So pause the video. I'll give you maybe 10 to 15 minutes to work on this, and then we'll review the answers together. Okay, you should have answered your question, so I'm going to click the link. Okay, so here is the answer key. Number 1, plot the events of the story from exposition to resolution. I've put the events in red. So our exposition is, it is Rachel's birthday. She's 11 years old. That is a semicolon, by the way. Conflict is Mrs. Price, Rachel's teacher, finds an ugly sweater. She gives it to Rachel, claiming that it belongs to her. Part of the rising action is the sweater does not belong to Rachel. However, she is scared to tell Mrs. Price. She puts the sweater on when the students are on the playground. The climax is because the sweater is so ugly, Rachel begins to cry in front of her entire class. Falling action, Phyllis Lopez, Rachel's classmate, claims the sweater as hers. Rachel gives her the sweater. The resolution is that though it's Rachel's birthday, she admits that it's been ruined because she cried in front of the entire class. So your events should look like mine for the plot. Number 2, because the way you grow old is kind of like an onion or like the rings inside of a tree trunk. These are examples of a simile because they both use like to make comparisons. So the way you grow is like an onion, or the way you grow is like rings inside of a tree trunk. Number 3, what is significant about this day? It is Rachel's birthday. And if you put her 11th birthday, that's acceptable as well. Number 4, how does Rachel feel about turning 11? Why do you feel that she feels this way? Rachel feels that turning 11 isn't such a big deal. She feels the same way as she did the day before when she was 10. Number 5, why doesn't Rachel speak up and tell Mrs. Price that the sweater is not hers? Rachel is afraid to tell Mrs. Price that the sweater wasn't hers. So she's afraid. That is why she doesn't speak up. Number 6, how does Rachel respond to Mrs. Price putting the sweater on Rachel's desk? She attempts to tell her that it doesn't belong to her, but is too scared to. She keeps the sweater, putting it on. So instead of telling her that it doesn't belong, she just puts it on because she's afraid. Number 7, what does Rachel do after she puts the sweater on? Why does she respond like this? Rachel begins to cry. She responds like this because she is embarrassed. Number 8, that stupid Phyllis Lopez, who is even dumber than Sylvia Saldivar, said that she remembers the red sweater is hers. So the repetition of the letter S is an example of alliteration. There's also the repetition of R because you have remember and red, but S is prevalent because you have Sylvia, Saldivar, says, she, sweater. They all make the S sound. Number 9, it's maybe 1,000 years old, and even if it belonged to me, I wouldn't say so. This sentence has an example of a hyperbole. It literally isn't 1,000 years old, but it is an older sweater. Okay, so now that we've completed our review, we're moving on to our written reflection, and then you'll be done with the lesson for the week. So in your notebooks today, I want you to write a short story about the best birthday that you've ever had. Remember, Rachel had the worst birthday ever, so I want you to flip it and write about the best birthday that you've ever had. And I want you to use one of each in the story. I know this says poem, but it should say short story. I apologize for that. I want you to use a simile, a metaphor, an onomatopoeia, a hyperbole, an example of alliteration, an idiom, and then one additional form of figurative language, which is your choice. So you can use your vocabulary cards to do that. Again, this is a short story. I apologize that it says poem here. That's a typo on my part. It should say short story. And then for your independent reading, again, you'll either choose a novel of your choice or a short story article, and you'll either read the chapter of the novel or the article for 20 minutes. Try to see if you can find 1 to 2 examples of figurative language being used in the reading selection that you've chosen. Okay, so that concludes our presentation and our week. I've truly enjoyed working with you guys this week, and I thank you guys for tuning in. And I hope that you guys look forward to next week's lesson as well. Thank you for hearing me out and doing these lessons. And I hope that you guys have a wonderful weekend. Bye.